Hello, my friends. Something that's always been interesting to me is the question of how Northern Europe became Christianized. And by Northern Europe, I mean, the Celtic, Slavic, Baltic, Nordic, Germanic peoples. How did they become Christianized? And it's a really important question to me because Christianization at that time essentially meant losing your autonomy as a people and becoming subservient to a foreign power. Because the Christian church at that time was basically a political institution. You had to pay tithe, 10% of your income. You were put under the thumb of bishops and other church officials. And essentially, it meant losing your autonomy as a people and becoming subservient to a foreign culture and a foreign political institution. And the Christian church had imperial and sort of world conquering aspirations. It was a universal, I mean, the word Catholic, Roman Catholic, meant universal. And so, how did these people become subservient to this foreign power? It's always a question that's interested me. And in order to answer that, at least for myself, I've always thought that it was a good idea to look into the earliest political figures in Northern European nations that accepted Christianity and enforced its spread, enforced conversions upon its people. And the more I do that, the more I look into who these particular people were, these kings and political leaders in Northern Europe who first accepted and enforced the spread of Christianity on their people, the more I begin to question whether they themselves were even European, or whether or not that this was sort of a covert colonization or a covert conquest that now, historically, when we look back on it, we're told that these kings of Denmark or kings of Sweden or kings of the Holy Roman Empire or these other figures that we're told are European, whether or not they're actually native to that area, or whether this was, in a sense, genealogical infiltration, or the result of foreign colonization that was more covert. It was less of an army or a militaristic conquest, and more of a covert colonization attempt. And one figure that I have here on the screen, who was very important in the Christianization, and as it says here on his Wikipedia page, Europeanization of Denmark, is someone called Absalon. And right away, the name itself should jump out at you. Absalon it's a Hebrew name. It means father of peace. Absalon is a son of King David in the Old Testament. So already we have a name that is certainly not native to Northern Europe. And Absalon was a bishop from a very powerful and influential family, the Hevida clan, which owned great amounts of land, was presumably involved in trade. It was extremely rich. And he was the closest advisor to King Valdemar of Denmark. And he was, as it says here, a key figure in the Danish policies of territorial expansion in the Baltic Sea, Europeanization in close relationship with the Holy See, which is the political institution of Rome, essentially of the Roman Catholic Church, and the reform in the relation between the church and the public, meaning that he enforced the spread of Christianity within these regions, within Scandinavia and the Baltic regions. So a non-native name, was this guy actually Danish? I doubt it. It seems that he was not actually Danish. He lived in the 1100s, by the way. I haven't mentioned that. And a couple of things that supports the idea that he wasn't actually Danish. One little thing that might it might not be anything, but it's worth mentioning is that his family clan's coat of arms is the seven-pointed star. The Havita clan used the seven-pointed star as their family emblem, their coat of arms, and the seven-pointed star has a few different possible meanings, but it's been used in Christianity, but it's also a symbol used in Kabbalist Judaism, in Kabbalism. And it's been used in Thelema, which was basically another form of Kabbalism, as the symbol of Babylon, the goddess in the occult religion of Thelema. And it's also used in alchemy. So it's kind of a strange symbol to see as the coat of arms in the 1100s in Denmark. But that's kind of just a small detail. Another interesting part of it is that Absalon's father is named Asser. Asser Rig. And he's known as Asser the Rich. We all know who has always been known as being rich, wealthy. And Asser is another name that is not native to Northern Europe. Another individual named Asser was a famous Welsh monk from the 900s, 800s. And it says here on his Wikipedia page that Asser is likely to have been taken from Asser or Asher, the eighth son of Jacob in Genesis. So another non-European name. Another Hebrew name. And as one last little detail to confirm, or to at least support, the idea that this Havita clan with Absalon and Asher were not actually Danish, were not actually from the area. It says here, post-medieval noble family on the Havita clan's Wikipedia page. The 19th century writer Herman Bang was raised by a paternal grandfather who, at times, impressed his grandson, Herman, with stories of their alleged family ties to the historical Havita clan. And when you look at Herman Bang, first of all, he doesn't have particularly Danish-looking features. He's got dark hair, big old dark eyebrows, big nose, puffy lips. If you look at other pictures of him, doesn't look particularly Danish to me. So if this is a descendant of the Havita clan living in the 19th century, we can only imagine what the original Havita clan, Absalon and Asher, could have looked like. Because presumably, if they were foreign, if they were from more southerly or Middle Easterly regions originally, they would have looked a lot more Semitic. And this is presumably after, at least I would assume, some amount of mixture with the native Danish population, and it still hasn't quite washed out that Semitic quality. And Herman Bang, by the way, was a homosexual who says his family history was marked by insanity and disease, and he was an influential member of the what is called the modern breakthrough in Denmark, which was a cultural movement that was involved in breaking all kinds of taboos, typical tricks as they say. He published novels that were considered obscene at the time and were banned. And yeah, the modern breakthrough is this movement that was led by, this is just a little tangent. The modern breakthrough that Herman Bang was involved with was led by Georg Morris Cohen Brandis. So this is the sort of person that he was associating with, this descendant of the Havida clan. And Brandis was of the Hebrew persuasion, the Hebrew tribe. And so his whole movement was involved with just the breaking of all kinds of taboos and the sort of stuff that you would expect from this sort of individual. And so all kinds of stuff about Herman Bang, the family history of insanity and disease, which we all know is associated with the inbreeding of the Ashkenazi people, the destruction of the destruction of cultural mores, and one other just little interesting thing that my brain likes to just make as many connections as possible, even if they aren't particularly relevant. Georg Brandis, his last name really reminded me of someone else, which was Louis Brandeis, who was an American Supreme Court justice, who was from a family, the Brandeis family, who were Frankists. And if you followed any of my work prior to this, you would know that the Frankists were a Jewish sect that believed that the best thing they could do in life was to invert all morality, to do the opposite of what is generally considered good, and to overturn as many cultural morals as possible. So it makes sense that these people, the modern breakthrough, was involved in this kind of taboo breaking activity, and that I would assume that Georg and Louis Brandeis were both related, that these two last names are just variations of each other. But anyway, that's sort of a tangent. Let's get back to Absalon. So Absalon, who now I think we can assume was not from the area, not from Denmark. At least his family was not from Denmark. Excuse me. He was the closest advisor of King Valdemar of Denmark. So the question becomes, if Absalon was not Danish, if he was a sort of a foreign agent who was working to subvert and subjugate the area of Scandinavia and the Baltic Sea region to this foreign power, to the foreign Catholic Church, why did King Valdemar accept him as his closest advisor? Well, when we look at Valdemar, turns out that Valdemar was named after his grandfather, Prince Vladimir Monomakh of Kiev. And Vladimir Monomakh, that name, by the way, should sort of stand out. Doesn't seem like a particularly Northern European name. His name comes from the fact that his mother was a close relative of the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Monomachos. Who has a pretty long nose, at least in the way that he was depicted. So, already at this time, in the 1100s, Kiev was genealogically colonized or infiltrated by southerly, Middle Easterly, powerful families. By the way, Monomachos was Armenian, I do believe. If I could find. I'm not able to find it. But anyway. So both Kiev and Denmark. Oh, here's another relative of Monomachos with the long nose. So it seems that as early as the 1100s, we have this coincidental occurrence of Northern European countries being ruled over by descendants of Byzantine royal families. And I see this as a kind of genealogical colonization, as I've said, or a genealogical infiltration of northern power structures, of northern political institutions. These people are foreign to Northern Europe. And at least what I expected before researching these kinds of things was that Northern Europe in the 1100s would be ruled by Northern Europeans, by native people. But it seems like that's not the case. That even as early as the 1100s, as Christianity was being imposed upon the population, the ruling class was not even really native to that area. That they had very close ties to other very southerly imperial families. Old, wealthy imperial families. And it seems like these people came up into Northern Europe, and instead of just overtly trying to conquer the people, they had strategic marriages into their own native royal families or ruling noble families, and sort of insinuated their way into the politics of these areas in that way. And this example of Valdemar having a Byzantine grandfather, essentially, is not the only example. The more you look into the origins of these Northern European royal families, at least in the medieval period and afterwards, you see more and more examples of southerly, powerful royal families insinuating their way into their families, into the Northern European families, making strategic marriages, and probably also just sending members of their family up there with tons of power and resources, and just planting themselves in these areas and declaring themselves to be part of the new ruling elite there. And another example of that is Theophanu. Theophanu married Emperor Otto II, the Holy Roman Emperor, in the 900s. Theophanu is the niece of a Byzantine emperor, John Tzimiskes. So, does this look Northern European to you? No. So, just something to consider. I think it's important because the empires of Rome and Byzantium, especially after they became Christianized, seemed to be involved in the one world government agenda 1,000 years ago. And it might have been sort of a different phase, an earlier phase in this agenda. But I think that there is a lot of continuity. And we need to recognize that there's continuity from then till now. And that what we're seeing today in the New World Order, one world government agenda, is just, in a sense, a continuation of this older uh, agenda that it openly existed back then. And now it's kind of more covert, but not really. I mean, it's not even that covert when you think about it and you read what these rulers say. But I think we need to recognize this continuity. And we need to see that history isn't really what we've been told. That the ruling elite of Europe has been compromised, in a sense, for a very long time. And, when people talk about colonization and imperialism, it's always the white man colonizing poor Native Americans or poor Africans or whoever it may be. But I think in reality, we need to recognize that the first victims of colonization were us Europeans. And we were colonized by these imperialists, which began in the Middle East. And that's why, for 1,000 years or more, we've had people like named Absalon and Asher dictating political policy in places like Denmark. So, just something to consider. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.